All right. Don't have any attendees just yet. But here we go. We got to start getting some attendees coming in, and we thank you all for joining us for Terra Third Thursday. I apologize. I am having some issues with my connectivity. So if I seem to drop out, I'm just apologizing in advance. But if you all will please just hold tight, we're going to leave the registration open here for just a couple more minutes while we allow stragglers who might be potentially having any kind of technical issues like myself register, and then we'll get going here in just about 2 minutes. So everybody just hang tight as we let people filter in, and we will get started just as soon as we can.
You got any other last minute advice?
You told me to put the blinds down. It's better down.
It's funny.
It's no retention.
All right, everybody. Well, we're just continuing just to be on hold here for just a moment. Those that have joined, we appreciate it. We just again are going to allow a couple of minutes for our folks that are having some issues with connectivity connect to the presentation. There, as always, we're going to be recording this, so it's going to be available after. We typically do within about an hour or so of the event. An email's out to everybody with a passcode, so everybody can go ahead and watch it. But again, we're just going to get started here in just another 30 seconds or so. So if those of you that have that are on, if you just hang on to be patient, we'd really appreciate it.
You'll just put your camera on for the introductions.
Yeah. We'll turn it off.
Sounds good.
Okay, well, we're just going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon, and welcome to the third installment of Terra's Third Thursday webinars for 2022. I want to take a moment to thank all of our Terra members that help with their support, makes these programs possible. Likewise, for any of our guests that may be joining us today, we want to remind you all that these sessions are free for members, so we want to encourage you all to join Terra. As usual, we're going to be doing a presentation about 45 minutes. We try to do very brief and to the point. We're going to have some opening remarks here by myself, and then I'll be passing it along to our host. If you do have any questions, within your control panel, you'll find areas where it says questions. That's where you can submit anything. Also, maybe even the chat feature if you're having any difficulties with some of the functionality on the questions panel. But I'll be looking at those as the presentation continues, and I'll be asking questions intermittently and then, of course, at the end as time allows. Before we ultimately get started, I want to again make mention that at the end of this is all being recorded. So we will have this available for download and online viewing at our GoToWebinar channel for Terra. And at the conclusion, we'll send all of our attendees and those that could not attend today but registered a link to that as well. So before we really get started in earnest, though, I do have one quick commercial. I wanted to give a quick shout out to an organization that has joined Terra here recently as a sustainer member. And that is the organization called Avid. And I'm actually using their product right now. They're probably a brand that you know of but have never heard of. They are actually the company for many years that provided, and still do, headsets and other kind of electronic services to our airlines. They're now in the education market, the healthcare market, and they're still making and manufacturing headsets and other like accessories. They are an employee-owned company, and they really are purpose-driven and want to get involved with being more integrated with the circular economy, and approach Terra and done with it to have provide some recycling services to their products. So we really appreciate them joining us. It's just an example of one of the projects that we're working on. In the coming weeks, we have also some very exciting news that we want to pass along on the consumer marketing front that's going to help us get the message out there that certification matters, and help, again, try to drive as much equipment as we possibly can to our certified recyclers, which is our purpose. But let's go ahead and get started. Today, we are pleased to be drilling down to another timely topic that industry is dealing with. Identifying pain points and the new normal. You mentioned that you notice here that I'm using a bunch of buzzwords because we're going to go beyond the buzz, and we're going to start talking about, actually making an impact and the resources we have at our disposal to do something a little bit better. So, as we start, the person who's going to be, thankfully leading us on this journey is our friend Andrew with Securaze. He's been one of our founding allied members, and he is currently the US CEO of Securaze. Andrew brings an entrepreneurial spirit and strategic perspective to his role. He is a trusted advisor to his customers, partners, and as well as his teammates. And he is well versed in market trends and the application to contemporary business. As a CEO of Securaze here in the US, he leads the North American operations and is a board member collaborating on global strategy for their business. So I'm sure you're eager to hear from him as I am, so I will pass the baton off to Andrew. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you, Stephen. Certainly appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to talk a little bit about market trends today. Just a little bit of background on me. I started my IT career back in 1997, working for CDW as a generalist. After that, moved into managing 5 states for Insight, and really enjoyed my time there before getting into more advanced technologies. So data center as well as IT security. And consequently, down that IT security path, a former CEO of mine had asked me to join his team in this space about 6 years ago. And I kind of love this story, and I think it kind of just frames everything perfectly for me, because it's such a shift from where I'm at today. So when I asked him, what do you guys do? The concise answer was data erasure and diagnostics. And consequently, after playing in large data centers, very high levels of IT security, I thought that sounded incredibly boring. But fast forward to today, I absolutely love this space. I've fallen in love with it because there is nothing that I've ever been a part of where literally, if I'm doing my job correctly, if I'm working with the partner network correctly, collaborating with people, we literally get to positively affect everyone out there that we see, even if we're doing it from behind the scenes. So, after being with my former company for a number of different years, working very closely with customers, I saw that there were still industry challenges that, needed to be addressed. And, about 2 years ago, I was introduced to an amazing team, from Austria. And what I really loved about this team was they were former engineers from HP, Dell, Siemens, EMC, and a large telecom provider. And for me, that was awesome because they were engineers and they were focused on the problem. And that really was the genesis behind Securaze. Obviously, I had to do a bit of due diligence, but ultimately with a team that was kind of united on solving industry problems, it made a lot of sense. And it made me very excited to progress forward with this company and look at the wide array of problems that are out there that I'd heard of being in the field for numerous years, and looking at strategic ways that we could actually address those and do things differently. So for me, that's why I came on board to Securaze. And what I promise you today is we're not going to jam a Securaze commercial down you for 45 minutes. That's not the goal of this. The goal is to really kind of lean into our passion and hopefully our collective passion when we get a look about the impact of this industry as it relates to sustainability, data security, and all the transcendental shifts that are going on around that. So that's a little bit of a long-winded introduction in my background. I look forward to having a conversation today. I know many of you will be on mute, but if you do have questions, please feel free to kind of chime in as we proceed. And I'll also be querying Steve throughout with some questions to try and drive things forward. And prior to maybe jumping into the meat of the conversation, let me go ahead and introduce a couple of my fellow teammates that are here with me. So Jake, as well as Dennis are here, and I'll let them say a quick hello, and then we'll get into the presentation.
Hi, I'm Dennis. I'm from Germany. I'm a student of computer science, and I'm working on the integration of ERPs and APIs.
And I'm Jacob Carter. I am a sales engineer out here. So that's exactly what we do.
Yeah, thanks. And Jake's a mechanical engineer by trade. And, I kind of think about when I first got into this industry and how it was pitched to me, when I brought on Jake and other teammates, because on its surface, it doesn't sound sexy. But as you start to get involved, you realize the impact that we get to have. So with that being said, let me go ahead and transition to our first slide. And what I'm showing here is nothing that's going to blow anyone's minds. This is actually something we've all seen. It's what we're currently talking about today when it comes to what we do, in the ITAD space, right? We want to talk about sustainability. We're used to seeing a lot of good data out there. We've all heard the number of 57.4 million metric tons of e-waste was produced globally in 2021. And the new stat I heard is, I've heard Eiffel Towers, I've heard the Queen Mary, but with the increase, we have now surpassed the weight of the Great Wall of China. And, of that, only 17.4% of e-waste was recycled in 2020. These probably aren't new figures to you. You've heard these. But I did come across one that I hadn't seen previously. So Steve, this is going to be your first question.
All right.
If you think about e-waste, right, we have the data. Of that 57.4 million metric tons, which the general public knows nothing about, how much do you think, from a percentage standpoint, the general public thinks is being recycled?
Wow, that is a great question, and I even doubt the 57.4 million tons. I bet that's lowballed. I would say they overestimate it pretty high, maybe half.
Yeah, I think that's a great guess. So on average, the general public thinks that 40 to 50% of this e-waste is being recycled. So what does that tell you right out of the gate, Steve?
We have a lot of work to do.
We have a lot of work to do. Yeah, not only to meet public expectations, right? But there's a huge education gap that I think we all face in our common days. We know that people don't understand. And the nice part is consumers these days are eager to know what's going on. So the opportunity for us to educate is huge, right? And then the other thing that, I don't know that I've seen before is 1 ton of e-waste equals what in terms of tons of CO2, Steve?
I don't even want to venture a guess on this one, but I think this is an area that I know for certain that is not equated. E-waste and CO2 are not equated. They think of other materials as being contributors to the CO2 problem, but they don't think of e-waste. So this would be interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing the number here.
Yeah, so if we look at 1 ton of e-waste, it equates to 2 tons of CO2 being pushed in the air. And that doesn't even factor kind of that downstream, right? Us being kind of these first world countries, we don't really think of that. That gets pushed down into Asia, Africa. And as we all know, not only does that affect children there because they're actually the ones having to deal with it, right? But they're burning that e-waste. It toxifies the air, it toxifies the groundwater, the soil. It creates massive problems for that entire region that we just don't deal with, including those toxic elements that are there, mercury, lead, cadmium, etc. And today we're starting to see this shift from the linear economy to the circular economy. We're all talking about it. Are we there yet? No. Is it part of the focus? Yes, we all know it. And then as part of that, we talk about how we can offset those things. Net zero, carbon credits, carbon offsets. And then I think the most recent thing that has come up in the past couple of years is really the geopolitical climate and the events. We've known of the fact that China produces most of the rare earth elements that are used in electronics. But now we actually have the challenges going on with Ukraine, and Russia, and they process a lot of the precious metals that go into these things. So again, this is really just kind of setting the stage for what we're going to talk about today, right? And then if we kind of look back to the data security part, so we look at it really from 2 sides. We look at it from the sustainability, and then we also look at it from the data security. Data security is one that has been driving this industry for a number of years, and as well as the valuation of those assets that can be recaptured. In 1998, we only had really 1 regulatory compliance and that was the Data Protection Act. Fast forward to 2021, and that's ballooned to over 80 plus regulations, many of those which we know, and especially when it comes to like GDPR, CCPA, NIST, ISO 27000, HISA, PCI DSS, and FISMA. So compliance is one thing. Compliance never equals security. It's merely a framework and guidance. So there's extra steps that need to be done. And those are also where industry trade organizations are coming in to help drive this forward. And if we look at data breaches in 2021, right? So that's not just limited to the ITAD industry, but it certainly has elevated the attention that's being placed on end-of-life assets. And you need to consider ITAD as a security incident these days. When I came into this space, I was in IT security, but you were looking at kind of logs, you were looking at network level types of security. People never really thought about the basic blocking and tackling, that is data security and data that's residing on those devices. So, for me, that was a real eye opener. And I think the entire industry and the world is starting to see that more has to be done. The average cost of a data breach, depending on where you're getting your information, is between 4 and 6 million today. And the largest payout last year in 2021 was by an insurance company that exceeded $40 million in USD. So,
and the damage to people's brands, damage to the brands and reputation and their customers is immeasurable. That's one thing I think often gets forgotten in those discussions, is they talk about the dollar figure and the penalty to the company, but not the damage that it costs to the end user and the consumer.
Yeah, and I think that's many times not quantifiable. What we do know is a lot of those companies go out of business because their brand cannot recover. So we've seen that time and time again. And I think, again, that was setting the stage, but let's actually take a look at this graph and understand kind of where we are. Prior to 1760, we were an agricultural, industry, right? That's what mankind was. And then the steam engine got invented, in 1760, and that started the first industrial revolution. And since then, there's been ongoing iteration. In the 1900s, the third industrial revolution came to computing, but right now we're on the verge and we have entered the fourth industrial revolution. But if we look at our industry today and the problems that we're solving today, we're playing in that third industrial revolution space. And there's still challenges, still problems, and things that we have to overcome on so many different fronts. And ahead of us is the fourth industrial revolution. So kind of the call to action of this call is, looking at everything in aggregate, yes, we have to solve kind of the challenges that exist today, but it's no longer okay to react. What we now have to do is we have to get proactive, and we can't do that unilaterally. It's not just going to be me and my company. It's not just going to be the trade organizations. It's going to take a massive concerted effort to really address the demands that are being placed on our entire industry from this fourth industrial revolution. And I think one of the things that's really interesting to me is we see a lot of people that are really trying to compete over a small piece of the pie, which is that third industrial revolution. There are so many different ways to kind of take your blinders off and diversify. Because if we look at the amount of growth that's going to happen in this industry, the challenges that we need to solve, they're exponentially more than we are facing today. And I actually want to point this particular piece out. So the fourth industrial revolution, and I'm going to read it verbatim. We stand on the brink of a technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another. In its scale, scope, and complexity, the transformation will be unlike anything humankind has experienced before. We do not yet know just how it will unfold, but one thing is clear. The response to it must be integrated and comprehensive. And I highlighted this part, involving all stakeholders of the global polity, from the public and private sectors to academia and civil society. So to me, what that means is I can't just sit in this office here collaborating with my colleagues within Securaze, or even just our industry people that know what's going on to try and solve these problems. There has to be a proactive approach where we're actually working across all of society to get ahead of this. And we need to innovate in advance instead of trying to innovate in arrears to solve the challenges that exist. And to really kind of highlight that, I want to talk about the fact that the crux of the fourth industrial revolution is data. We live in a data economy these days. We've seen it from a privacy perspective, from a resource constraint perspective, and in the end, all that data has to live somewhere, right? So by 2025, Statista predicts the world's data will grow to 180 zettabytes. That amounts to 180 billion terabytes of data. So, Steve, how much data do you think you were produced in 2020?
I don't know. That's a tremendous amount of data in 2025, though. Not half that, maybe. I don't know. I'll throw that number out there for the sake of discussion.
If you're really good at math, and better than me, and you want to look at that compounding rate of 19.2% from 2020 to 2025, you'll find that last year, or 2020, we did 44 zettabytes of data, right? So we're going to more than quadruple the amount of data by 2025. So we know what that means. It means opportunity. It also means responsibility like we've never had before in this industry. I think it's funny how we actually focus on the fact that there's 57.4 million metric tons of e-waste being created, and we're only recycling 17% of that. And that is just a smattering. So if we can't close the gap on that third industrial revolution challenges that we face, imagine what we're going to face if we don't get ahead of this with the fourth industrial revolution. We have game-changing technologies, and people are aware of this, right? Artificial intelligence and machine learning, the Internet of Things, everything is connected these days. Big data, where that sits, it's got all kinds of predictive capabilities. We know it tracks us, it knows where we are. There's privacy concerns around that. And then we have these digital currencies that are happening, and they're happening on blockchain. You have NFTs, and these things just don't happen on their own volition. They are actually happening with every delta and block, somewhere in a data center, and managing what that chain looks like so that that chain can't be broken. And that's an always on kind of technology and requires exponential amounts of data. I remember probably a couple months ago when there was a shortage of hard drives, and working with my fellow ITAD vendors, stuff that used to be on their cut line, were now being requested in high demand. Old hard drives, spinning disks, so people could actually do blockchain and cryptocurrency and mining along those routes. And then you have the digital transformation as we go from cloud to edge computing, robots and cobots. Steve, you know what a cobot is?
Don't know what a cobot is. What's a cobot?
Don't worry, I had to look it up too, right? But basically, what it is, it's the robots that are actually driven by humans, right? So they're intelligent enough to actually have a human operator, and they're an extension to that person. So that's what a cobot is. And then we look at autonomous vehicles, right? We see them driving I live in Arizona. We see them all over our roads. Dennis, by the way, was amazed the other day because he ordered food from Walmart, and a driverless vehicle showed up with his delivery. And I'm not sure exactly where all that's happening in the US. Arizona is one of the primary states where it happens, and we have them all over the roads. And to do that, massive amounts of data. Also, the 5G's network, its ability to actually drive data along those lines. And the other thing I would say with autonomous vehicles, I can actually kind of just revert back to rental cars, right? That's a huge issue. If you get in a rental car today, and one of the first questions it asks you is, do you want to connect your phone? So, Jake, have you ever connected your phone in a rental car? What happens?
It takes all my contacts, music, everything.
Yeah, it takes your contacts, it takes your music, takes everything. And then guess what? I can also see Susie, Billy, Marks, everyone who else had that car. I can see all their information too if I wanted to get in there. That data exists on the car. And today, that is a security risk. That's PII and privacy. And then we're coming on quantum computing, which deals with qubits and can potentially even hack 256-bit encryption in seconds. And then finally,
There goes blockchain.
Yeah, exactly. And then finally, and that just means that blockchain is going to have to, outdo itself to address quantum computing. So
Yeah,
as all these
be even more
technologies,
secure.
yeah, you have to innovate in the head. So the whole point is we can't continue to solve in arrears. We have to be proactive, right? And then the final one, which I think a lot of people are excited about or completely scared about, is extended reality, right? So virtual reality, augmented reality, brain-computer interface, those are things in the three primary technologies that are driving the metaverse. And the crazy things that we're seeing about the metaverse and the levels of excitement is, it's going to be a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Right now, virtual real estate is going to be a trillion-dollar industry in the metaverse. So the fact is, intelligence is the driving force changing the industry today. It's created new kinds of disruption and new opportunities. And those opportunities are for the people that would be on this call, right? How do we solve those? And then in doing so, how do we also be good stewards when we solve those? So we need to think of things through. And to do that, what it's going to require is whole life thinking. We can't just think about, building the asset, the new technology, the innovation, without thinking it entirely through. Because if we do, and by the way, I love this graphic, we can have a very technologically advanced, globe, that's connected in all these things. But at the same time, dark skies. We are depleting resources, depleting human capital. It is just undermining our way of living, and it has an expiration date. So there needs to be other things that are supporting this, and collaboration have sustainable energy. We know privacy concerns, are there. So that 80+ regulations, we can expect that to also increase substantially. And what you're starting to see now is some of the more progressive companies, like Microsoft and Apple, for example, as well as Samsung. They're looking to adopt more of a supply chain transparency, because it used to be a consumption model where they would take that stuff in and then they would look at how they can be sustainable after that fact. Well, now the goal is you have to actually look upstream. You have to look at product quality and safety standards. How are these raw materials being sourced? The rare earth elements, the precious metals, we've talked about the challenges there from a geopolitical climate. So that just drives the need further to make sure that we're operating in a circular economy. And that 17% recycle number, we need to obviously accelerate substantially, because here in the US, obviously we've kind of turned to other countries to provide us those resources, which go into everything. And one of the things I also want to highlight down here is, we still tend to be a culture of out of sight, out of mind. More than 1 million children are working in gold mining around the world. The gold that they mine may well end up in electronic factories used to produce mobile phones, computers, and other consumer electronics. Obviously in the US or other first world countries, that would not be acceptable. So we have to also push that into the supply chain to say that it's not acceptable anywhere else. And then that moves us into labor practices, which is part of that, and then environmental protection and sustainability. And for me, this is really a substantial component to it, because like I say, when you go from 44 zettabytes to 180 zettabytes and understand the resources that are going to be required to allow that to happen, if we are not much more proactive with the environment and the sustainability, there's huge issues ahead. And we're already hearing the issues today, and people making commitments to be net zero and carbon neutral. So it'll be really interesting to see how those things stand up, understanding the growth of technology and innovation. And it's up to us to kind of collaborate and solve those. We've also seen, decentralized versus centralized processing. I think people, historically have looked at ways that they can bring things into their local location. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, so I won't belabor it here. And then with the 4IR, we're seeing a transcendental shift in the workforce. People are no longer doing those mundane tasks. So we have the ability to improve the quality of work and to employ everyone. But what we also see with technological advances is we also see separation, between the people who are skilled labor and those who are not, right? So it creates disparity, in our civilizations once again. So again, have to increase focus on partnerships and collaboration. And one of the things that I love with us being a connected world these days and the benefit of technology is that today's consumer isn't yesterday's consumer. You know, today's consumers firmly believe that they have the right to know exactly where the products are coming from and how they are made. Before they open their wallets, they want to be sure of the product's safety and quality, and increasingly that the sourcing practices are in line with their own values. You know, we see ESG, CSR, even portfolios and stocks that will invest entirely in those companies because consumers are interested in those. We know that people will pay more for companies that have a very strong ESG policy because their personal morals and value set says, I want to support companies that are doing things right. And I think that's a huge thing for us. So the one thing that I'll actually do is I'm going to actually step back. I've set that stage and then I will come full circle. But one of the things I talked about is in our industry, we're actually talking about industry 3.0 for the most part. A little bit of 4.0. I'll get to that slide here in just a few, but it's really existing challenges in our industry. So when we actually formed Securaze, our goal was not to be a Me Too vendor. We didn't want to go out there and say, guess what, we have a prettier way of doing this, right? Look at the fancy UI, look at the great colors. We had to solve real problems that existed in Industry 3.0, and that's really kind of our launch point before we get into 4.0, when we can really look to kind of separate ourselves. But that go-to-market strategy looks entirely different. When I was actually out there working with my customers, here's the things I heard that were challenges. And what I loved, once again, is our company was developed by engineers. So like me, they wanted to solve problems that existed out there. It wasn't a sales organization, so some of the things that we said is, all right, we need to have an agile framework. So our modern code was developed on microservices. And one of the things that was really smart for us is we also decoupled the erasure engine. Security is paramount, right? And you can't have sustainability without security, because if you don't have security, all that stuff gets shredded. And one of the things from a case in point I will say is an absolutely crazy use case that we saw here in I'll just say Arizona, is there was an acquisition by two huge financial corporations, and one acquired the other. And as part of that, 17 data centers had to get decommissioned. And due to the concerns and to the lack of understanding, so there's an education opportunity, those 17 data centers got decommissioned 100% by shredding. So the valuation that could have came out of that, multi-millions of dollars, people don't care, especially if you're in the financial industry, if you feel there's risk. So that becomes an education opportunity. And really one of the things that we see from that, and I'll bring it down below, is I'm going to actually step down where you see business, organizational alignment. Too often in our industry, we're actually operating in silos. So, in that particular case, you're dealing with a CISO whose only goal is my data cannot get out or my job is lost. However, you could be in another industry talking to someone that is in IT. They've been given a certain amount of budget, and if all of a sudden they can get $1 million back for their assets, that is off the record, out of their budget, and those are new projects that they can fund based on that. And then the third person, is the person that's in charge of sustainability, the chief sustainability officer, and what is her role to kind of contributing to the brand and having this overarching understanding of what's going on in the organization. And if these people are operating in silos, they have different goals. So to bring these people together to talk about things is critical. And that's a marching order for all of us. So just think in that particular case where we can actually say, those 17 data centers that you're looking to decommission, that's a problem, right? So let's talk together collectively about how we come to a common solution. And that's going to involve the chief sustainability officer. We can give reassurances to the CISO that that data is not going to escape, being handled by a certified ITAD, that's R2, eSteward certified, NAID certified, and provide the necessary audit trails so that they can have reassurances that that is not going to escape into the wild. And then from a valuation perspective, sure, they'll get valuation. In their end, they didn't really care. And what I will tell you is we've actually even talked with chief sustainability officers that they may get $2 million in valuation, of a product that could be processed by an ITAD. I've literally seen them say, I don't care about the valuation, keep it. I just want all the records. And what I need is for you to give me back all the information, because what I then get to do is actually take that information, put it in an ESG report, bring it into our CSR policy, and the impact that we are being good stewards of data as well as sustainability, that is exponentially worth more to my brand than the $1 million, $2 million that I might get for repurposing, repairing, recycling that hardware. And I think that's a huge thing. It's something that's going to require more and more for us, And then with us, talked a little bit about microservices. So I'll get back kind of into our technology and some of the problems that we saw out there. So a few things that we saw is we saw it was hard to kind of maintain certifications. If we look at different players that are out there in the industry, they have legacy code bases that have been cobbled together through mergers and acquisitions. And it's very difficult to maintain that common criteria EL2+, which is the most stringent by 32 governing bodies. ADISA 2, we've also actually incorporated Atingo, which is third-party forensics. And the beautiful part is we've decoupled that erasure engine so that we can just maintain the erasure algorithms in there. So think of it kind of as a Lego. And the nice part is that transcends all of our product lines. So we can maintain that and give our customers reassurances that those certifications aren't lapsing, because we're not trying to do it across all kinds of different products. And then we also understand that, the world is changing, right? So, you have Amazon that's coming into different regions, and they're offering $15, $20 an hour, whereas these ITADs and processors, we're offering 12 to 15, and a lot of them are now having to match Amazon. But what we saw is a workforce that was in constant turnover. So you couldn't have these complex UI, UXs. It had to be something that was understanding the operator and focus, so very quickly they could get ramped and do his or her job. And then the other thing I would say is remote support, huge for us. I've seen in the industry when people have challenges, the industry by nature isn't very good at supporting customers. So with us, one of the things that we've actually done is we've built on top of the AnyDesk platform that is permission-based and can be disabled. We also have the ability to do entirely air-gapped environments. But whether or not our customers need support, we want to make sure that we can address that very quickly, because this is embedded in the DNA and the success of our customers. And we know that days delays, create those customers money as well as frustration, and they might have SLAs that they also have to hit. So, our developers, our team actually set up Teams chats, with our customers. They also have access to Jake, myself, and Dennis, and customer support is huge for us. And if by chance it can't be solved through the Teams chat, they can go ahead and create the user access permissions and grant us access. And based on microservices, again, we can remotely log in to any one of our products that are out there and have full controls, but only if they've given those to us. So very quickly, we can do root cause analysis. Is this a training issue? Is there a problem with the software in this particular asset? And, God forbid, but it happens, is there a bug? But if there is a bug, hey, we're going to be open and honest and transparent. We're going to identify that and look to remediate it very quickly, because we are agile, our framework. And within a day or two, we can have resolution to you, or at least direction, so that you can go ahead and proceed with confidence as to what's going on. We've also looked at, some of the challenges that were out there. My customers were always asking about Chromebooks, Intel and ARM-based. We were the first ones to bring that solution out to market. It's being used. We use some creative technology to do it when it comes with a Raspberry Pi. The way that we approach Apple T2 chips, Apple Silicon, heard those problems as well. And we were at the forefront of developing innovative solutions there. And then finally, comprehensive iOS OEM part validation. We had the most comprehensive in this, and you can actually see the report on the right. And as part of that, not only can we actually look at the OEM part validation, but we can accurately identify from the asset itself if there's an FMIP on it, as well as if there's an MDM or DEP. Historically, MDM DEP was about 50% accuracy rate and a huge source of RMA for customers. With us, we're actually talking at a deeper level of the firmware, and we can assess whether or not there's an MDM or DEP on that phone with accuracy. And with FMIP, we're doing some creative ways to actually talk in an approved fashion to GSX cellularly to understand if there's an FMIP on that particular phone. So we're not having to do a third-party data integration on that particular piece to solve a problem. And we can be very accurate and very quick with it. And then the final thing that I'll say, and I'm actually going to bring this into the next one, the pandemic created needs for all of us, right? As well as a lot of business. And there was a transcendental shift to solve some of the problems that were out there as IT teams were scrambling. So remote erasure really got jumped to the front of our technologies and how we can solve a huge pain point that was happening for our customers. So I'm going to give you a case study on that one here in just a little bit. And then in the end, with Industry 3.0 solutions, it still comes down to partnerships, right? I can't do this all alone. I still need to collaborate with OEMs. I still need to collaborate with technology partners, data integrators. If I need to see if something's lost, stolen, e-commerce, how am I actually communicating with the e-commerce sites, Backmarket, Bstock, Amazon, eBay, Shopify, you name it. The various ERPs that are out there. And as we move into Industry 4.0, AI, robotics, etc. And then consequently, how do we actually extend our solution beyond just what we do? We're a software company, right? We do it very well, right? But in the end, is that a solution? It's a part of a solution. So for me, it's collaborating closely with ITADs, also extending their solution suite and network. And I will tell you, one of my favorite things that I can do is to be networked and to know a lot of people that are out there. I have people today coming to me for R2V3, and they're like, I've got serious issues because R2 didn't require that I actually data clear feature phones. R2V3 does. R2 didn't require that I actually erase network. R2V3 does. And what I love is Securaze, we're not there yet, but I know people that are actually doing those things, and I fully trust and support them. And I love throwing my support behind them, right? And I think that's kind of the approach that the industry needs to take. So, for network, for example, Ultratech Solutions, Ultratech, their Genesis product. Not only is it software-based, but it's also hardware-based. So it's actually getting in the nooks and crannies that no one else can do. And I love being able to educate my customers on that. Oops, I jumped forward there. And then also collaborating with the industry trade organizations. A lot of people don't understand the value of having these conversations. So whether it's working with Terra, working with RLA, CTIA, I'm fortunate to actually, be a co-chair on their grading scales, and I'm very grateful for the team, for that respect, as well as a number of the other committees. iSigma, SERI-R2, eStewards, ITAM, etc. There's a number of these, and it is very important for me to get involved and actually collaborate with these people to provide thought leadership. It's not an opportunity to plug who we are and what we do. It's about the industry getting together to solve problems, and these things are critical as we move into Industry 4.0. And then the final thing that I'll just talk a little bit about is education, consumer impact, right? We understand that consumers, are taking more of a vested interest in everything out there. So we need to educate them. I talked a little bit about business organizational alignment above, and then government. Government's going to continue to legislate, but I think we need to continue to kind of elevate the real effects that are ahead of us. We talk about climate change, but the more that we actually move into 4.0, the more that we're going to have an impact unless we innovate in advance instead of in arrears. So Steve, I've been doing a lot of talking. I'm so used to this being more of an engaging conversation. Kind of based on just literally the dump that I've thrown on everyone. Any questions that you have, or any questions that our audience wants to pop up?
Well, I thought you explained, this transition that we're in the middle of, going from the third revolution to the fourth. If you were to kind of boil it down to, getting started is probably one of the most difficult things because there's so many different ways you can approach this. What's the leap of faith that you think the industry is going to need to take to work together in a more proactive way?
Yeah, and I think that's still to be determined, right? And by the way, I just looked and saw that it's 12:45. So let me get to that point in a couple slides, because the truth is I don't know. But that's why I'm fortunate to be part of a partner ecosystem and bring kind of the knowledge that I have and collaborate with some of the best minds in the industry. And I learn every day by going to seminars, whether they're Terra, whether they're RLA, having amazing keynote speakers and thought leaders that really challenge my traditional way of thinking and say, things have to change. And that's for us to all kind of get together and figure out how we change those things. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to kind of breeze over this thing, but what I will tell you is one of the biggest things from the pandemic was the need to solve remote erasure. Because right now, data in transit's a huge concern out there, right? As well as chain of custody and managing, those audit trails. So that's one of the things that we focused on in the very beginning, and it's one of the things that's being deployed out there to enterprises, as well as your creative ITADs that are looking to solve problems. In the ability to actually deploy this in a seamless fashion and understanding the operator. These are going to my mom, my dad, a lot of different people in enterprises have zero technical competency, so it needs to meet them from that level. And it can be deployed through ADGPL, ServiceNow, Intune, WebLink, Shopify, third-party systems, and ultimately there's a ton of flexibility. And if you get to it, I'm going to fast forward through this demo a little bit to try and take us to the part to just show you how easy this is once it's deployed to an executable MSI, the actual interaction that transpires from the user is they understand that when they click this button, their data is gone. And then what we do is we take the opportunity to say, hey, education's a huge piece. Most of these people aren't going to know what's going on. So this can be entirely customized, but we put a bunch of sustainability messages out here. And from here, it's entirely locked down. And at the end, what we've done is we've actually quarantined, the erasure report on a 1 gig partition before sending that up into the cloud and then having it erased. So the point is you can have a certified audit trail showing that this asset was data cleared, data erased based on any of 20 plus algorithms, before it actually comes into the operational center. So enterprises can feel good because they don't have to worry about something falling off the FedEx truck or getting hijacked. And then from an ITAB perspective, they too get to feel good because it's a service that is needed. And then this time frame that is required from an operational overhead on their side, they actually have the audit trail that when that comes in, they know that that device has been erased and they don't have to wait the 30 minutes to potentially 2 hours, depending on what that erasure algorithm is in hard drive, to go ahead and complete that asset. And I really want to give a shout out to one of our solution partners here. And by the way, I did get approval, from Circle IT to do this because, like I said, it's not just me that can provide a solution. We're the software, but when I get with industry leaders who kind of see the vision and want to actually work on sustainability and improving the current environment, magic can happen. And with Circle IT, now one of the things that's beneficial about us too with our microservices is we're built on a design table. So very quickly we can go ahead and adapt colors, messaging, to make it their own brand so that they could actually offer this. And that's what you see before you. And then this is an integration with Shopify, and it has an entire workflow that once the actual consumer, or it can be enterprises, go ahead and sign up for this, it goes ahead and actually sends them the link to the software, and that can be disseminated any number of ways depending on the enterprise. And ultimately, once that is erased, It's going to recognize that, communicate back with the dashboard, with their ERP, go ahead and send a FedEx shipping label to them so that that can actually be returned and managed very efficiently. And you can see there's many benefits to it versus the traditional legacy box and label method that you do see people employ. That increases risk. That's not as sustainable. You know, and I think the other thing when we look at members like Terra is, hey, those members which also have to look at something if you're championing sustainability. You know, if I'm a member out in California and I have this great program, you know, does it make sense for me to try and, you know, win this asset by winning a deal up in Maine and then shipping it all the way to California? Well, at that point in time, my integrity has been compromised because I'm no longer sustainable. So by working with a Terra network of people that are certified and approved, creating those partnerships that you can actually kind of optimize a process like this is huge. You know, and in doing so, you're actually going to have organizational goal alignment. I get to appeal to the Chief Information Security Officer. I get to appeal to that Chief Sustainability Officer. Information technology, the valuation piece, they can have that. And all three of those people get to look like champions within their organization because they've hit their goals. So to your point, Steve, moving into Industry 4.0, it's crazy, right? Going from 44 zettabytes to 180 zettabytes, impact is huge. There's huge amounts of opportunity for all of us. So that just means there's more time and opportunity for collaboration, and we have to partner more effectively. We don't have to look how I can take business away from this person. The mindset should change to how do we get to work together to have thought leadership, because there's plenty at this table to eat and we have big problems to solve. And if all I'm concerned about is making money, well, guess what? I'm damaging the environment, and truly I need to take a more ethical approach to how we're actually doing business. You know, you have Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, smart devices, big data, et cetera, that we're talking about. You know, and to actually address these things, it's going to require innovation with partners. You know, someone like me might be doing SDK, APIs, JSON, agents, et cetera, as we work with the OEMs, technology partners, solution partners, industry trade organizations. And again, you know, I also want to highlight, I said someone like me, I have Securaze over there, but I didn't want to compromise any trademarks. We all know there's other people out there that are in the erasure, data sanitization, as well as diagnostic space, right? We're all going to talk about how we do things a little bit different. But in the end, we should all come together to solve these massive problems, and we're not going to do it alone. We actually have to extend that and work with all the different trade organizations, e-stewards, OEM, Terra, Siri, you know, iSigma, CTIA, ITAM, and then we have to continue to elevate that up and out into supply chain transparency, working with not only the consumers to educate them, because when we educate, there's certainly something we can do. But if we have the consumers educated, the demand then comes from the consumers and it comes in arrears, right? And that puts the impact on business, that puts the impact on government to drive legislation. And that's something that we need to champion now, instead of just responding and looking for assets to come through our doors that we can erase. We have to start collaborating now and driving this entire industry forward so we can all be successful, not only from a data erasure standpoint, privacy standpoint, you know, monetization standpoint, but first and foremost, from being able to protect Mother Earth, because these are great innovations, but at the end, if we're not doing things to address the sustainability, circular economy, and ramping those efforts up, then we're in dire straits.
Exactly, and you know, we have gone a little bit long today, but I really wanted to, you know, let you, kind of get to this position. And really, we started a conversation today about kind of moving into this fourth revolution, fourth industrial revolution, and as you said, we're just clawing at the very beginning of this. How does this industry start to come together to make this happen? And you know, I asked you the question. I don't think you ever ultimately gave me an answer as to where do we start. But I think just listening to you, I kind of came with an answer for myself, which is trust.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are so many competing organizations in this space, whether it's ITADS or whomever, but there is so much room for collaboration, and that's going to generate its own level of innovation, its own level of sustainability. And I think that's the point where, we start finding some common ground and start working together on solutions that, are going to, ultimately be the driver of the next 100 years of innovation that some of we're mostly not even going to see. But it's going to start here with us as we get our arms around the problems of logistics, the problems of supply chain, the problems of rare earth materials, and how do we return them back into a circular economy. This is kind of the challenge that has been presented to us, and now we've got to come together and work together in a trustful way, I think, to get to a point where we can pass along something to the next generation that is sustainable, something that we're not going to leave them with a giant problem.
And that's what I love, Steve, and sorry, just for one more minute, if you don't mind, is I want to be able to sit down at the table, not as Securaze, but as someone that's truly passionate about this industry. If you look at the graphic here, there's multiple hands looking to solve this puzzle. That is trust, right? I want to sit next to Black Belt, Securaze, EPS, White Canyon, right? We might be able to collaborate on how we can do some things, but ultimately, that's just a starting point for us. We have to trust working with the industry trade organizations, the ITADs, and then all the different OEMs. And we have to look at this thing as a holistic approach to really address this. And like I say, I don't have all the answers today. My goal is to really have a call to action so that when we move into this, these slides coming back full circle, what is it going to look like when we move ahead? As we move to that year 2025 and we see 180 zettabytes, what will these data points look like then as compared to what we're sharing today?
Exactly. And unfortunately for all of us is that this problem is accelerating. It's accelerating exponentially. So the more we, just got to stay within our own fiefdoms and protect our own backyards, the problem just grows ever larger. So I appreciate, you and, your mindset and your willingness to work with the industry and to work together to try to find some solutions that we all can be proud of and all can work together to make a difference. And I look forward to continuing our partnership. And again, thank you very much for your time, and those that have joined us. Remember, we will be sending out a copy of this, where you can go to our GoToWebinar channel at Terra. We'll be sending out a copy to all of our members here within the next hour or so. So we look forward to seeing you again next Thursday, where we're going to have talking about something a little bit more down to earth, which is, how do we handle batteries and batteries best practices within our facilities from our partner Battery Solutions. Again, Andrew, thank you and your team. Thank you, all our Terra members and our guests for visiting us today, and we'll look forward to talking with you guys next month. Until
Awesome.
then, take care.
I appreciate the great work you do. Thanks so much.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.